Hey guys, welcome back to Help Me DIY. My name is Aaron, but today I have a very special guest, Lucas. You may have seen him before on some of my videos. He has a 2020 M2CS, and he just installed some Millway camber plates. And he was awesome enough to record it for me because I wasn't there, sent me the video, so I compiled them to give you a nice DIY on how to install them yourself. So without further ado, take it away, Lucas.
Okay, so getting started for the camber plate installation. We've got quite a bit of trim to remove, so we'll start with the two pieces in the corners here, and that will require 10 mil quarter turns in 3 locations, and then we've already started working here, but the plastic rivets need to come out at the corner. All right, and just to show you an example here, I have not gotten this one out yet, so go ahead and get you a pry tool and kind of work around the corners here. Try and lift up carefully, as these are quite tricky. And if you're having some difficulty with plastic rivet here, it can help to pry out this panel first and make yourself a little more room. All right, with these removed, we can lift the trim piece out. And with that panel removed there, you can get a little bit more access to this plastic rivet. These are quite tight on this strut here, so all the room you can get is helpful here. Okay, that cover was very challenging to remove, but just keep working at it until you're able to lift it out like the other side. Now the first thing you'll notice, or should notice, is that you have a positive battery terminal here. Try and take some measures to protect that terminal, because there's a lot of surrounding metal and you'll be working with the fasteners, tools, etc. in this area. And we'll go ahead and disconnect the electronic damper control and remove a few other plastic rivets similar to before to get some room here. And this just pinch here on the clip and it should release with a little bit of wiggle. And this connector body here lifts out like another plastic rivet, and we worked it out, and then you should see barbed plastic here. And then with this cover, just kind of clear it out of some of these pinch points, and we should think just kind of pull it back out of the way. There is another one down here you can remove next to all this pollen if you want to get a little more clearance, but for now we'll just flex it out of the way to reveal the damper actuator here. And for this cover here, you just work kind of from the sides, and you can pry it off and slide the boot backwards like this. Make some room. And that'll expose the this piece here. And then for the connector itself, just give it a nice firm grip and lift straight out here, and that'll expose the strut nut. All right, so with that cover peeled back, we've exposed the strut nut on this side. A similar process on this side. There might be an extra plastic rivet or two that you have to find around the corners. There's also one down here. We've kept that one intact just to avoid any risk of losing plastic rivets in the engine bay, but similarly, disconnect the harness, expose the strut nut, and now we can begin disconnecting the carbon brace from both sides. And so we take our 13 mil and just remove here. There'll be 2 here, 2 on the other side, and then a couple more here and here. Okay, and we've gone ahead and removed all the fasteners, and this should lift right out. With one exception, there is a small clip here that attaches the coolant reservoir, so go ahead and undo that one. And with that, we should be ready to lift and remove the strut base. brace entirely. Okay, with the carbon brace removed, we can now remove this enormous aluminum welded, machined sheet metal combination brace that runs along the back. And there are several bolts, two that are hidden behind these little boots here. These are soft rubber. You can just kind of, you can push it in and kind of twist it out, or just work around the edges, and then they should pop right out without much difficulty. And with the two boots off, you can access and remove these 16mm fasteners holding up the back of the brace. And to expose the last fastener here, we just need to pry off the driver's side trim piece. So a couple more plastic rivets. These come out pretty easily, so just get those out. And with those removed, we can go ahead and work this out from behind there, exposing this fastener here. And so we have some E-torques here, and we'll remove those next. And this is a 14 external torques here. So, and then do the same thing on the other side, and then we have 3 E12s surrounding the shock mount. And then on the driver's side, we have one more fastener here. It's a 10mm. And that will disconnect again, the coolant reservoir. And that should free up the aluminum brace. And with all those out, this should just lift right up. And there we go. Okay, so while the car is on the ground, we do have sort of the weight of the vehicle pushing up against this shock tower, the springs. So we're gonna go ahead and just loosen all of these, and then also get to loosening the damper attach. So again, while this is on the ground, it's a convenient time to just get these started. Okay, so for this nut, you can see the kind of wavy nut on the outside there. That is an 18mm, and then there's this 10mm hex. So if you try and untorque that 18mm nut, what can essentially happen is you won't have a way to react that torque, and this shaft will just spin inside the damper along the seals, and supposedly that's no good for the damper. So we will use this tool by Schwaben. It's an 18mm 12 point with sort of half the diameter machined out. So you can get this installed here and still have an ability to access that nut with the 10mm open end wrench, or maybe even a socket, to react that torque while you're loosening the tower. Okay, so we have our wrench there, and then we'll go ahead and show you kind of with the 10mm. You can get that in there, and then you can start to loosen with the big wrench, and keeping the reaction torque on that small nut there. And so you just kind of work it around slowly. Maybe you have to reposition occasionally, but it'll keep it will keep the shock from spinning in the seals. All right, after disconnecting all of the braces, and we've gone ahead and just loosened these 5 fasteners, as well as the strut nut using the tool just a little bit. We can go ahead and get the car jacked up and start to remove the wheel. Okay, with the wheel removed, just do a little bit of prep work before we start to manipulate the strut. Back here, there's this box here. You can open that up and then just disconnect the ABS and the brake wear sensor from the box. That'll get you a lot more slack when you lower the suspension, so you don't cause any difficulty there. And just for good measure, you can also remove the electronic damper control just to get yourself a bit more slack, so you don't end up pulling on that wire. Okay, and we'll slide a jack underneath the rotor just to put a little bit of preload. And then with that applied, we should be able to disconnect the anti-roll bar, drop linkage here, and then also put a little bit of preload so we can finish up loosening this and remove all of the top mounting. Okay, so we get a 5/8 or roughly equivalent metric size on the nut, and then here it's a T30 Torx. And you can hold the nut with this wrench and then use the ratcheting wrench there to help drive that out. Okay, and then with the 5/8 holding, go ahead and just twist the ratcheting end. All right, now once you have the nut removed, you may need to adjust the height of your corner to have that bolt be roughly parallel with the hole, and that will make it easier to pull out. And then just kind of set this to the side and keep it out of the way because we'll be dropping the suspension shortly. And of course we're just using one jack, so we have a jack supporting the car and then one supporting the unsprung. If you had a quick jack or some other kind of dual jack on the front, this could be a little bit easier to disconnect this, but in any case, it's possible even with one. Okay, and with the weight of the unsprung supported, go ahead and undo the nut here. This has already been detorqued. And you'll want to make sure that if there's any torque on this nut, you want to make sure you use the 10mm open-ended wrench to ensure that the damper doesn't spin. And now we can go ahead and drop the corner, and that way we can get the damper strut out of the way so we can remove the top mounts. Okay, we got the jack all the way down. That means that the strut should be making its way out of the hole. However, there's not quite enough clearance with the jack in place, so what we're going to do is we're going to pick up the assembly, lift it up slightly, remove the jack, and that will allow it to fall just a little bit farther, and we can get the strut all the way out of the hole. Okay, so with the jack out, we just put the 2x4 there just to keep the brake off the ground, and what you'll see is that just by virtue of doing that, the spring and strut have fully vacated the space there. So this gives us the clearance we need to come up here and remove these fasteners. You don't actually have to bring the strut out from under the wheel well. You just need to get it off to the side enough to be able to drop the shock mount out. Okay, so we're just removing the fasteners here, and just keep one in there to hold the mount in, and then we're going to go ahead and reach under to support, and then just sort of tap this out with a non-marring mallet or a clenched fist, like so. And that should do it. We can just kind of work it out from underneath. And yeah, and if that piece sticks to it there, just kind of pry it off as you lower the mount down. And just like that, you got your shock mount out. Okay, and with the shock mount removed, we are going to have to reuse the steering bearing here. This is the bearing that allows the spring to rotate as you turn the steering wheel. So go ahead and get a pry tool, just about anything will do, and just sort of work at it from a few different angles. Okay, and with enough prying, it should lift right out of the mount. So just kind of work around the perimeter, and eventually you should get enough lift to where it can be removed by hand. And there it is. So set that aside, we're going to be reusing that very shortly. Okay, so this is our Millway street camber plate. You'll notice it does not have a monoball. It is a PTFE lined mount with 3 fasteners that you can remove to adjust the camber setting. So we're going to reuse this kind of isolator here, and we're also going to reuse the steering bearing, so that will just hop right on to the outer diameter. And just one thing to note, if you'll flip it over, that it is identified as to whether or not it's the passenger or the driver's side. This is the left, and you can use these 2 alignment nubs, which are some hex fasteners here, to insert them from the wheel well going up. Okay, and one thing I might not have mentioned before, this M2CS does not have the reinforcement plate around the strut tower, and the fasteners you used in the Millway kit will depend on what the configuration is of the strut tower. So in this case, it is without the reinforcing plate, so we will use these grade 8.8 screws and washers. Okay, and with the isolator installed to the plate, just to make sure it stays on, we can go ahead and install it through the wheel well, kind of working it around the damper, bump stop, and boot there until it lines up. And then with that in place, we can grab a fastener and thread it in with a washer. So I'm threading that one in, I'll get the next one. And just need a couple to secure it, and essentially work around each one of the 5 through holes here into those helicoils, and you'll secure the camber plate in place. Okay, and if the steering bearing is having some trouble staying on the camber plate, we just decided we can attach it to the spring, and we'll try raising it up all at once, and so we should see that visually kind of snap into place. Alternatively, if you have enough clamp up between the steering bearing, you can actually just attach it directly to the plate and then raise the spring up to meet it. So we used basically a 10 millimeter socket with a knurled or a grab point here. It's kind of a ratcheting hand tool. And you can use that to kind of locate the strut and help guide it up into the hole as you're raising it. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and just torque this down to the Millway specification, and then once that's secure, we can raise the strut into the hole with the help of the hand tool here. Okay, with everything torqued down, go ahead and make sure you've got good alignment with your spring and your steering bearing. That will move independently from the strut, so make sure everything is seated properly as you begin to jack the suspension corner up into the hole. So we jack the corner until additional jacking doesn't move the damper pin anymore, and you're just compressing the spring at that point. You can go ahead and install the 18 millimeter and repeat the process of removing with the tool. As soon as you start to get some spin in that shock shaft, you're going to want to put a reaction tool on there and prevent the shaft from spinning. Okay, and with the nut torqued down, you want to make sure you torque down using the same tool. And now we're ready to remove the jack and begin installing some of the suspension parts back on. So we'll go ahead and get the drop link back in. Looks like we actually didn't need to disconnect this here, so you can leave that connected, and put the little box of sensors back together. And then, like we mentioned before, adjust the height of the corner as needed to get that suspension drop link to pass through that hole. So you might need to jack up or down a little bit. And with the drop link fastener through the hole in the strut, we can go ahead and reinstall the nut and torque that down with the 5/8 and T30 or equivalent metric. Okay, and now we can just get these wires back into their spots here. Just line up the grommets with the notches in the box and then clip them back up here as well. And that should secure the wiring. And before I forget, one last harness to clip in for the electronic damper control. And like I mentioned, don't really need to unclip here. Just undoing this gives you plenty of clearance to drop the corner. Okay, and why do we put on camber plates? To reduce tire wear at the track. So got my Apex wheels, Honka Ventus RS4s, and we'll go ahead and install the wheel back on and torque them down. Okay, with the wheel back on, we're ready to lower the car and get back to reinstalling some of these strut braces and trim pieces. Okay, so we also did the right hand side of the car with the camber plate, again oriented like so, and we'll go ahead and put the metal strut brace back on and fasten them to the camber plates. Okay, so we're just lifting up the flap, sliding the brace back in, goes in, helps to have two people doing it. And now you'll see there are some fastener holes for the strut brace to mate up with the camber plate. Okay, so we get our T14 fasteners in there, and then again in here, and we'll torque those down, and then we'll move to the camber plate fasteners. Okay, it is possible to reinstall the OE fasteners here, but there is a chance, and I think one of these, I don't recall which one, it can protrude through too far and then interfere with the spring or the steering bearing. So we're gonna install the Millway supplied fasteners here and washer. That'll make sure we keep it from protruding through, and we'll torque those down as well. This is 16 millimeter, and we're gonna go ahead and reinstall these two 16 millimeters back here. And when you've turned them down, torque them down to the manufacturer spec, and then you can put the little boots back on. And we'll just lean in and pop those caps back into place there. Very easy here. And then we'll go ahead and reattach with the 10 millimeter small fastener there. We'll go ahead and thread that in. Okay, and with the aluminum strut installed, we can go ahead and reinstall the carbon strut back in place. Again, it was 2 shorter fasteners here, and then 4 longer ones up at the metallic, and then finally 1 more to secure the reservoir. Like we did up here, it's a 10 millimeter, and you just line those up and torque it down. With that torqued down, we can move on to the shorter fronts. And these are a different size, so we'll need to grab that metric socket. And that was the 13? Yep. So the 13 millimeter, secure the fronts, and we'll move back to the rears. And finally, let's grab the 2 fasteners here. Use my left hand there, and we'll torque those down. Okay, and if you're having some trouble fitting the last fastener, go ahead and loosen all the others, and that should give you an easier time torquing this one down. Okay, and then you'll just reinstall the connector. Make sure you take note of the orientation of the pins. It should only install in one orientation. Okay, and now once you have, keeping in mind to the terminal here, once you have the grommet back on top, you kind of just massage it into the corners using the little flaps of the grommet to get around this weather stripping here, tucked down here, and kind of all around. You should see the holes line up. Then you can route the electron damper control out through here and then mount it back on like that. And then should be ready to reconnect the harness. Okay, and then we'll just reinstall the corner trim piece here, just like that, and then we can put the plastic rivets back into those holes. All right, once you're done manipulating with metallic components, you can go ahead and remove the covering for the battery terminal there. In this case, we use Gorilla Tape, towel, or some electrician's tape should work just fine. Now we're ready to reinstall this piece, so you just slide it in to mate up first, and then just redo what we did before. 3 quarter-turn fasteners and the 1 plastic rivet in the corner. Okay, with those trim pieces back installed on the driver and passenger side, that is really all there is to it. So that was Millway Street camber plates. I've got the at first glance, doesn't appear that appears that the setting that Millway brings from the factory doesn't introduce any unusual effect on your alignment. So should be good to drive to the shop, where they'll have to get back in here and adjust those fasteners, those Torx fasteners, and essentially they'll take that top mount, translate it inboard, and the effect on the strut will be to tip it over and get you a little more camber. But other than that, that has been it for the installation of the Millway Street camber plates.
Man, how great was that? Lucas did a fantastic job not only doing the install himself, but taking the video of it and sending it to me so you guys can see as well. Now, if any of you out there have a project like this and you don't have a way to get the content out to other people, but you want to show them how to do something themselves, feel free to contact me, send it to me just like Lucas did, and I will edit it and post it on the channel. All right, help the community, like the channel, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.